r/AskReddit. What is the funniest joke you know by heart? Two hunters are walking in the woods when suddenly one of them collapses. So the other one calls 911 and says, "Help, I think my friend died." So the operator says, "First make sure he is dead, then a gunshot is heard." And the guy comes back and says, "Okay, now what?" Edit. Holy duck, this got way bigger than I expected. Thanks for my first gold award, strangers. Comma. Said Pinchenny. Look. Just because he shot somebody doesn't mean you have to judge him for it. A woman promises to teach her boyfriend what 69 is. He lies on the floor and she squats down over his face to assume the position and farts. Embarrassed, she stands up and apologizes. She squats down for another go but farts again. She gets up and apologizes again. Before she can have a third go, her boyfriend gets up and goes to walk out saying, "Yeah, this isn't really for me. I'm not having 67 more of those in my face." Damn, that just made me laugh really hard. Same minus the laugh. Have you ever heard of the Greek hero Buphades? His story is similar to the story of Achilles. When he was a child, his father held him by the groin and dipped him in the river Styx as to make him invincible in battle. However, just like Achilles, he had a weak spot because his father held him by the groin. This was where he became vulnerable. In the case of Achilles, this was his heel. So you may have heard of an Achilles heel or the Achilles tendon, but I bet you have never heard of Buphades nuts. Goddamn, take your upvote and leave. A blonde walks into a dry cleaners and tells the woman at the counter, "I need to have an outfit washed." The clerk was busy and slightly distracted, so she looked up from her work and said, "Come again." The blonde said, "No, it's toothpaste this time." Edit. Lovely. 11k points and my first silver for a tasteless blonde joke. Thanks, guys. Heard this one as a Lewinsky joke. A Jewish woman has two sons. One becomes a doctor and the other becomes a politician. The politician gets elected to the state senate, but the mother does not go to the swearing in. He is elected as a US senator and again, she does not attend the swearing in. Finally, he is elected as the US president and she agrees to attend the inauguration. While he is reciting the oath of office, the woman pokes the man sitting next to her and says, "See that guy up there? His brother's a doctor." Same is the case with Pakistani parents. Asian parents in general. Knock knock. Who's there? Owls. Owls who? Yes, they do. My wife is threatening to kick me out of bed for telling her this at almost 11 p.m. Thank you. Achievement unlocked. Two nuns sitting on a park bench when a flasher walks past, opens his coat and shows his bits. One nun had a stroke, the other couldn't reach. Two nuns are sat in the park one quiet evening and a vampire appears. One nun says, "Quick, show him your cross." The other nun says, "Bugger off, you two-featured, we are trying to have a nice evening." Welp. I'm going to be giggling about this one all day. Why don't kleptomaniacs enjoy puns? Because they are always taking things literally. I can't stand hanging out with pedophiles. They're all ducking immature assholes. They are the only people guaranteed to slow down in a school zone. A man walks into a bar and asks for a double entendre. So the bartender gives it to him. I've always said it as, a good looking gal walks into a bar and asks for a double entendre. So the bartender gives her a stiff one. English is not my native language. Could you explain the joke? A man walked into a bar in Scotland, sat down and ordered a drink. Next to him was a leathery old Scotsman, well into the bottle in front of him. The man asked the Scotsman if there was something the matter. The Scot replied, "In groundskeeper Willie broke, I'll add. Indeed there is. You see this bar here? I made this bar with me own two hands. Slowly crafting it in the time honored way of my forebears. It took me 4 months. But do they call me McGregor the bar builder? No. You know the dock that your ferry landed at the night before? I built that dock with me own bare hands. Finally honing each joint so that it would withstand the weather that Mother Nature unravels upon it. It took nigh a year. But do they call me McGregor the dock builder? No. And do you recall the livery stable you passed on the way into town? I stood that stable up in 6 months. With nary a bit of help. To this day that stable is one of the finest in all of Scotland. But do they call me McGregor that stable maker? No. But you duck one goat. When you tell it you have to do your best Scottish accent. I've heard the same one, but it was Giuseppe the Italian. But you duck one Italian called Giuseppe. HMM. Not as punchy, but I guess it still works. How do you find Will Smith in the snow? Look for the Fresh Prince. Also he's black. Edit. Thanks for the gold, kind stranger. I'm not even sure what that means, but Reddit says I'm dapper now, so yay. Thanks guys. We are done here. 3 men were at the gates of heaven, but there was only room for one person. Saint Peter asked each of them how they died, and the best story got through. Man 1, I was adamant my wife was cheating. I came up to my apartment on the 24th floor and walked in, only to find my wife by herself. I was pleasantly surprised until I saw a man hanging off the edge of the balcony by just his fingers. I went over to him with a hammer and hit his hands until he let go. He fell in some bushes and was still alive. So I grabbed my fridge and lifted it over the edge so it would fall on him. And after all that heavy lifting, I died of a heart attack. Oh, that is terrible, said Saint Peter as he turned to the next man. What about you? Man 2, well, I was on my 25th floor balcony doing some yoga and I fell over the edge. I was hanging on by just my fingers when I saw a man coming over. I was so relieved, but then he started hammering my fingers and I fell in a bush. I was alive but very sore. He then threw a fridge over the edge onto me, and here I am. That is just terrible, said Saint Peter. What about you? He asked man number 3. Man 3, well, I was hiding in a fridge. I feel like man 2 should get in. He was the only completely innocent one. Yeah, but he's a child molester on the weekends. This is a story about a man. His wife has told him that if he ever comes home drunk she will leave him. Nonetheless, he goes out. He drinks a lot and throws up all over himself. He turns to his friend and asks what he can do. His friend is helpful. Go home, he says. Tell your wife someone threw up on you and put a £20 note inside your jacket pocket. Show her the money and tell her the other man gave it to you for the dry cleaning bill. So this he does. His wife is at first angry, but he explains. He tells her about the drunk man who threw up on him. He shows her the £20. She looks. But why have you got 2 PS20 notes? She asks. Oh, he says. The other one is from the man who shat in my pants. I was at a Rush concert where they ran into some technical difficulties. While the technicians were frantically fixing things, Alex Lifeson got on the microphone and told this joke. Was it like an 18-minute version of it? 2 antennas are getting married. The ceremony wasn't much, but the reception was incredible. Carrot, I love you Danny and Arnold. A man walks into a bar with a slab of asphalt under his arms. He says, a rear please. And one for the road. A jumper cable walks into a bar. The bartender says, I'll serve ya, but don't start anything. What is Whitney Houston's favorite type of coordination? Handy. Oh sorry. You said a funny joke. My bad. What's Beethoven's favorite fruit? Banana. What's Bruce Lee's favorite drink? Water. 2 fish are in a tank. One looks at the other and says, hey, do you know how to drive this thing? The other one says, holy hit. A talking fish. Close. A panda walks into a bar. He orders a simple meal. After finishing it, he takes out a shotgun and fires it at the roof. The bartender asks, what the hell are you doing? The panda, walking out, says, I'm a panda. Look me up. Later, the bartender looks it up, and the definition says, eats, shoots and leaves. A joke that spawned the book Eats, Shoots and Leaves about grammar. A book about grammar that fails to use the Oxford comma. What's green? Fuzzy, and will kill you if it falls out of a tree. A pool table. What's red and bad for your teeth? A flying brick. What's blue and tastes like red paint? Blue paint. It's a long joke, and I'm drunk, so bear with me. A businessman is about to go on a long business trip. He wants his wife to be satisfied while he's gone, so he goes to a Rex shop. to see what toys he can get her. He asks the man at the counter for something really special and the man shows him what's called the voodoo pin. He shows the customer the magic of the toy by saying voodoo pin the door. And magically, the toy rises from the box and starts ducking the keyhole in the door. After a bit he says voodoo pin, back in your box. And the toy rests back in the box. The man buys it, brings it to his wife, and says whenever you get horny, just say voodoo pin my pussy, and it'll do the rest. The husband leaves for his trip, and after a few days the wife decides to give it a try. She opens the box and says voodoo pin my pussy, and the result is amazing. The best orgasm she's ever had. After a while she decides she's done and tries to pull the toy out, but she can't. Her husband forgot to tell her how to make it stop. Panicking, she gets in her car and tries to drive to the hospital, hoping they can remove it. She gets another orgasm on the road. A cop sees her swerve and thinks she's drunk and pulls her over. "Ma'am, how much have you had to drink?" He says. "I haven't had anything to drink, officer." She says. "There's a voodoo pin stuck in my pussy and it won't stop ducking." The cop doesn't believe her and says, "Yeah right lady. Voodoo pin my ass. My version is magic toy and I've been telling it for 25 years. Magic toy my ass is a common, non-XL, haha, phrase between me and my wife. Cheers." A girl needs to go to her gynecologist for a checkup. She gets checked in and sits down on the table. Doctor says alright, get naked and spread your legs. So she does, and he starts to examine her. The second he gets down there, she hears, "Wow, you have massive vag. Wow, you have massive vag." She gets all offended and says, "Well, you didn't have to say it twice." He said, "I didn't. Took me a moment." So 3 nuns are in a car accident and go to heaven. And they are standing outside the pearly gates and street. Peter comes out and says, "We've been having a couple of break-ins recently. So we need to verify that you're truly devout in order to let you in. So I'm just going to ask a couple of questions. Very easy. No problem at all. Just a precaution." So he asks the first nun, "Who's a novice? Who was the first woman?" And she says, "Eve." And he says, "Yup, you're in." And then he asks the second nun, "Who's a full-on nun? Where did Eve live?" And she says, "The Garden of Eden." And he says, "Yup, you're in." And then he goes to the third nun, "Who's a mother superior? What did Eve say when she first saw Adam?" And she thinks about it and says, "Whoop, that's a hard one." And he says, "Yup, you're in." 4 nuns die and go to heaven where they are greeted at the pearly gates by Saint Peter. He says, "Before I let you brides in, we have to guarantee your vow of purity." A heavenly light shines to the right of the gates, illuminating a fountain. So, sisters, any part of you that has touched a man's peen must be cleansed with this holy water. The nuns mutter for a moment before Saint Peter calls the first one forward. She says, "When I was a missionary at a leper colony, I gave an ailing man a sponge bath, where I accidentally touched him with the edge of my hand." Street. Peter gestures to the fountain, where she washes her hand. No sooner is she finished, before she's borne up in light and choir, and ushered into the pearly gates. Street. Peter ushers the second nun forward. She says, "When I was a young girl, long before I was a novice, I went for a swim with my family. One of my younger brothers had trouble keeping his bathing suit on, and my toes brushed him." Street. Peter nods. She cleans her foot and is accepted into heaven. The third nun steps forward and clears her throat to speak when the fourth one rudely shoves her out of the way. Addressing Street. "Peter, if you think I'm gargling with that crap after she scrubs her ass out with it, you've got another thing coming." 3 Italian nuns die and go to heaven, where they are met at the pearly gates by Street. Peter. He says, "Ladies, you all led such wonderful lives that I'm granting you 6 months to go back to Earth and be anyone you want." The first nun says, "I wanted to be Sophia Loren and poof, she's gone." The second says, "I wanted to be Madonna and poof, she's gone." The third says, "I wanted to be Alaska Papalini." Street. Peter looks perplexed. "Who?" He says. Alaska Papalini replies the nun. Street. Peter shakes his head and says I'm sorry, but that name just doesn't ring a bell. The nun then takes a newspaper out of her habit and hands it to Street. Peter. He reads the paper and starts laughing. He hands it back to her and says no sister. This says Alaska pipeline laid by 500 men in 6 months. Sherlock and Watson go camping. After a nice meal they go to sleep. A few hours later Sherlock wakes up, nudges Watson, and says Watson, look up and tell me what you see. Watson replies I see millions of stars. And what do you deduce? I think that perhaps there are many planets quite like ours. And that we are not alone in this universe. Very good, Watson. But as usual you have missed everything of importance. How so, Watson? Someone has stolen our tent. I feel like this switches the dynamic of the two. No. Watson is always trying to impress Holmes by attempting to duplicate his method, but always picks the wrong trail. Ducking like and subscribe.